Welcome to Private for Public, a deeper look at Maine's delicate and often complicated tradition of public access to private land. Brought to you by the Maine Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife. Have you ever wondered whose land you're recreating on? In this episode, I introduce you to one of Auburn's landowners, David Hanes. You might be surprised what private landowners have to deal with on their land in their efforts to share the diversity of the forest with the public, and David definitely has some interesting stories to share with us today. Despite these incidents of misuse, David finds getting to know people who use his land extremely rewarding and wants to stress the importance of continuing Maine's tradition of access to private land to strengthen the community.
Well, I've lived on the Butler Hill Road in Auburn for 52 years. I was a professor at Bates College and retired maybe 10 or 15 years ago. And my retirement occupation for me and my wife is our land. We have 270 acres with a lot of trails we've been developing, and we feel pretty strongly. I've had the land for many, many years, but I never really appreciated what was out there until recently. So I spent, now we just have a blast doing all kinds of stuff, trails and trail cameras and hunting and hiking and stuff like that.
And one of your piece of property, which is in Auburn, Maine, which if everybody who's listening knows, Auburn is close to Lewiston, which is a pretty populous area. You're also close to Mount Appetite, which is city-owned, correct?
Yes, that's right.
So there's a large, actually, parcel of connected land there that's kind of open to people.
Yeah, we aren't quite connected to Mount Appetite. We are almost, though. They're on the other side of Hatch Road.
So one of the things, that the reason why I brought you in, David, is I met you last year when you called during our landowner cleanup day. You described your land to me and what you had for property and stuff, and you described that you had a large amount of shingles and a deck dumped on your property, and that's really how we met. And tell me a little bit about that. Tell me about your land there and what has been going on there.
Well, we had a federal grant for wildlife habitat improvement. Our land is divided by the road, and on the west side of the road, we had quite a bit of logging done. Part of it was mass tree release to thin the oaks so we get a lot more acorns. And then there were some thinning for wildlife, which was a few clear cuts. It's a pretty complicated thing. We had a contractor write us a plan, and we had a wonderful logger came in and did cutting for us. But along the way, of course, he needed to create some landings. So he and I and a contractor created 4 good-sized landings for him to use. And one of the landings is the farthest one from our house. And I drove by one day, and right in the middle of the landing was a giant pile of shingles that had been dumped by a truck, maybe 2 truckloads. And but it's not new to us. Right now, if you go out there, that refrigerator that you saw, it's still there. It's not new to us. We have so much dumping along the road. And we decided to call the city of Auburn, and they sent out an officer who said we can't do anything about it because it's not in the roadway. And I thought about taking my loader and moving it out to the roadway to make So Auburn doesn't have the staff or they're so overextended. They can't deal with this minor road that's out in the middle of nowhere. So then I would say 2 days after the dumping, one of my neighbors came by and offered to clean it up. And I said, no, you shouldn't have to do that. And he said, well, I've got a loader. And I said, no, we're going to deal with this the right way. Then a couple of hunters came by, and they offered to help. And I said, thanks, but we're going to have to do another way. And then I heard about Kris's program, and I just called him up, and they came and took care of it.
So with that, I mean, obviously, one of our largest complaints that we get is land abuse, whether that's litter or people doing damage to people's property. And why is it David, that you decide to keep your land open even after seeing the 7 ton of shingles that were removed from your property?
Well, there are two reasons, one of which is my wife and I both feel very strongly about allowing public access to our land or to any lands for that matter. We've both hiked a lot, and it's an important part of our belief system, I guess, is the woods are for everybody. Just like the wildlife does not belong to me, it belongs to the state of Maine. So the problem is, with so much dumping, you get resigned to say, oh, this is hopeless, what can you do? We have a lot of trash that's dumped, bottles and cans, and you can imagine toilets and dead bodies and things like that. And after a while, you become pretty cynical about it. And you say, and we don't really pick up much anymore, because we know if we pick it up, there'll be more there the next day. So there are two parts of it, wanting to allow the public access, and the other one being kind of discouraged by the attitudes of certain people toward the land. We've been pretty happy with the hunters. I haven't found any trash from the hunters or unauthorized tree stands, or there are a couple blinds out there that I don't know. I mean, they spend $200 or $300 on these blinds, and they just leave them out there. I see them, and I think, oh, okay. It doesn't particularly bother me, but so anyway, that's where we've landed anyway. But the road is a problem for us because that's how the trash comes in.
And it's the only dirt road in Auburn, probably.
Well, there are some other dirt roads, I suppose, but I talked to a fellow in Mechanic Falls, a young fellow who's a businessman, and I told him where I lived, and he said, oh, we used to call that the dump road.
Well, that solves that problem.
Well, there's a new TV set out there, too.
So you were talking about, we've talked about this in the past, you and I having conversations and stuff, and you talked about the hiking and the hunting that goes onto your property. Like, what other types of activities do you allow? And I know that, like, you had a special occurrence this year where you had some turkey hunters come all the way up from out of state, and you want to talk about that a little bit?
Oh, yeah, that was a lot of fun. A year ago, June, this fellow came and sat down on the grass in front of the house and started talking about turkey hunting. And he wanted to know if he could hunt on our land, and I said, it'd be great. I said, I just hope you take 2 turkeys. And he said, well, we're not going to do that. We're just going to take 1, because we have and I've forgotten the name of it. I should have brought in the name. It's an organization who competes to get 1 turkey in every state. And they chose Maine, and they chose our property, and had a lot of fun talking to him. And they came out on our land the next morning and got 2 turkeys immediately. And I said, oh, you always have so many turkeys here. Wow, this is amazing. And can we come back? And I said, sure. Come back in the fall and you can get 8 of them. And they said, well, no, we got to work, but we'll come back next spring. So sure enough, in the spring, I got a text from him asking if it was all right. And they showed up. One of the hunters gave us a back scratcher. I don't know if you've ever seen this. I should have brought this thing. A back scratcher, and the end of the back scratcher is a turkey foot. I should have brought it and given it to you guys.
That's classic.
But this time they came, and he said, we can't find any turkeys on your land. And he said, we wandered all over. We had to go someplace else. Anyway, it's been a lot of fun. Really nice fellows, and I think they're fairly well off, but this is their passion. Every spring they go out, and they were leaving Maine to go to Michigan to try to get 1 there. I asked him what the hardest state was, and he said, Nevada, we're having a heck of a time getting a turkey in Nevada, and it's an awful state.
But you graciously allow these people to go on your property, and like we talked about the shingles and everything that gets dumped out there, the refrigerators and stuff like that. And like I know you and I talked about this before, but you're trying to get more people from like Auburn, Lewiston that like don't understand like what access is like and don't understand the woods. Like why do you continue to allow access to your property?
Well, one of the parts of this is I've been on the board of directors of the Stanton Bird Club for about 50 years. And we own Thorn Crag, which is a 400-acre sanctuary in the middle of Lewiston. And also we own Woodbury Sanctuary, which is another maybe close to 400 acres in Litchfield, Monmouth. And so as a part of our organization, which is all volunteer, we talk a lot about getting the public out into the woods. And Thorn Crag is right in the middle of Lewiston. It's just completely surrounded by houses, but it's a wonderful opportunity to get local people in to see what the woods are like, what the forests are like. And we really do nothing there except we'll do a little cutting, but mostly just maintaining the trails to make access for people there. So that's been something I've cared about for a long time. I've been very much involved in getting Thorn Crag in shape for public access. And our property is very, very different. But it's the same idea that you want to get people out to appreciate what's in the woods, whatever it is. The hard part for me is the hunters have always been there, although there aren't, I don't think, as many as there could be. I encourage them. But a lot of the public are afraid to go into the woods. And you probably run into this too. I've talked to friends in Lewiston, and they say, how can you live out there? Aren't you afraid of the bears? And there's a lot of this kind of misconception of what it's like to be in the forest. And I don't know how you battle it. I know you guys battle it too. But public access should mean people having a safe place to go, which I hope ours is, but also getting out and discovering new stuff. Our property is very diverse and a lot of things going on out there, and we want more people to share it with.
So with that being said, your property with the maintenance and stuff like that, are there ways that people can help you out on your property, like if they want to come over and help you out?
Well, we haven't gotten there. Yeah, we need the exercise ourselves, but we have hired some people to come out and work for us, which they did a lot of the heavier work on the clearing. We're working with the Androscoggin Land Trust. We're probably going to put a conservation easement on the land and keep it open to public with hunting allowed. And there are some opportunities to get other people involved. We just haven't taken the time to do it. Yeah, there are probably some opportunities to get some money to pay for things like little bridges and stuff like that. There are a lot of little projects that could be done there that we're sort of waiting to get the conservation easement to work better with the land trust.
So being from Maine and knowing like what public access is like here and having your own land open, what would you encourage other landowners that may have moved up here recently or like don't really understand like how we have it here, how good we have it. That's really when we have public access. What would be your statement to having your land open versus someone that's kind of on the fence as to whether they should have their land open or not?
Well, one of the things, Maine people, even Massachusetts people, they don't know a lot about Texas and Louisiana and places like that. And I've done a lot of bird watching, and I was really kind of jolted the first time I was in Texas to see the number of signs that were posted that were property owned by a private hunting club, and you just weren't allowed to go on there. And most of Texas is like that, I think. And then I realized, well, Maine has just had this tradition of open access to land, and it's a real, I don't know if there are other states that have this, but it's a real asset, whether it's just tradition, and it's been that way. And it doesn't bother me to see somebody wandering around in our woods. In fact, gives me an opportunity to go and talk to them. Most often it's a hunter, but usually I'd rather see other people too, other times of the year. And I do encourage it. We just lost a neighbor who, we didn't lose him. He's a young fellow he was actually a forest ranger who decided to bring his son up there on our trails. And he's got a 8-year-old son. He and his son go out there and they just wander around, and he sends his son off into the woods and he says, now, Sam, you go out there a little ways and then come back. And he's trying to encourage him to get to know the woods. And it's really nice to see that relationship between the two of them, but he's got to move. So they're leaving the neighborhood. We don't have a lot of neighbors, which is both good and bad.
This is the Talking Trash segment where we're going to talk about illegal dumping as one of the leading causes of private land being shut down for public access. Nautical lawn ornaments. Maine is known for its wild brook trout populations and ornamental boats that have been left into remote trout ponds for generations. Recently, during the Landowner Cleanup Day, Wardens Josh Poland and Sergeant Bruce Loring worked with a good group of local high school students and one 8th grader to help remove canoes and boats from a remote fly fishing only pond. The kids assisted with the removal of boats that were no longer seaworthy. This is a common historical tradition on remote bodies of water in Maine, where boats have been brought in to these remote locations over the years to be used by anglers who venture into these untouched locations. The boats either get damaged by long, heavy snow loads or trees that come down on them over the years, and the boats remain left by owners that may not even be alive any longer. It is always important to remember that even these remote trout ponds are commonly located on private landowners' properties, and it is important to be a good steward of the land. If the boat is no longer usable, remove the boat from the area, as it is eventually becomes litter, or as the title of the episode says, a nautical lawn ornament. Just remember, although it's a tradition to have boats kept in these remote locations, help a landowner out and remove the ones that are just fading into the ground. If you have any information in regards to these illegal dumping cases, please contact your local authorities. Reporting this illegal activity will allow us to continue catching the intentional violator as we continue to fight for public access. When I talk to landowners, I always bring up your property because it's kind of one of those ones that's special to me, that it's close to proximity to a population that could use it. And I always talk about how you're so respectful when it comes to, hey, listen, people are dumping on your land, but you still continue to leave access open, which is unusual because usually that does close down access.
Well, the problem is the dumping is on the road, right? It's not on the land itself. They don't need to go, well, once in a while they go into the back of a landing and dump stuff, but most of it is right there on the road.
Yeah.
So, it is my property. I own the road. However, it's the road. It's not my forest.
I mean, that is one of the things, I do think a lot of people take for granted is that we have the public access that we do here in the state of Maine.
Yeah.
Like you were talking about other states, and I've talked to some other people where, Vermont's more posted land than there is normally. Hunters are coming over here to hunt. New England traditionally is open to access, which traditionally Maine has kind of been that way. But obviously, like you said, those southern states, they're very different when it comes to access. So you leaving your land open and someone coming up from down south to turkey hunt and stuff is probably eye-opening to them when they just come up here and see a place that they can go.
Yeah, and the turkey hunters, of course, asked permission. It was really important to them to have permission, which I appreciate, but they didn't need to. They could have gone out and hunted turkeys, and that would have been all right with me, too. I had an interchange with a hunter last fall. One of the interesting parts is a number of hunters stop and ask for permission, but I don't think many of them ever go out there, which is okay. But one fellow from Poland stopped in and he said, well, I'm retired now and I've been hoping to spend more time hunting. And I spent a lot of time hunting in this field by my house over in Poland. And some guy from out of state bought it and he's got it all posted, so I can't hunt there anymore. Can I hunt on your property? And I said, sure. But that's what's happening. As you know, a lot of people they buy the land and they say, now I own it. I don't know what they're going to do with, even 20 acres. They buy it, they put up signs around it. They're going to go out there and bake bread or something. It's forest, it's woods, it's wildlife.
I know the last time that we met, like we were discussing some stuff, and you handed me this pamphlet from the Butler Hill Farm Trails, which is your property. And one of the things that kind of resonated with me was like right underneath the title of your place was "The Public is Welcome." And like from our perspective, I know Rick and I work hard to continue to maintain public access, but when the landowner actually has their own pamphlet for their land and it's welcoming the public, it's very eye-opening to us, and we really appreciate it for sure. And that's one of the things is we not only want to help landowners out, we want to thank them for continuing to allow public access. Have you heard about our Outdoor Partners program? For just $15 a year, you can help preserve Maine's tradition of outdoor recreation and support our private landowners. With over 17 million acres, roughly 94% of Maine's land is privately owned. When you become an outdoor partner, you help us provide critical resources to private landowners who help make recreating in Maine possible for the public. Your contributions go to signs, trails, law enforcement, educational programs, and events. You help maintain recreational access to hikers, bikers, wildlife watchers, hunters, anglers, trappers, recreational vehicles, and other explorers. You'll also be entered to win exclusive merchandise from our sponsoring businesses and organizations in our weekly drawings. Recent winners have received merchandise from Tacticam, Old Town Canoe, and North Maine Woods. Become an outdoor partner today to get involved and help us protect Maine's outdoors. Visit mefishwildlife.com/outdoor partners to learn more.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. One of the interesting parts of Thorncraig, the history, you're too young to know what it was like back 50 years ago, but it was a center for beer drinking, bicycles, motorcycles, a lot of really bad activity, drugs, everything like that. And some of the members of the clubs just said, oh, we can't do anything about it, let's just give up, except we're not allowed to sell it. It's got an easement on it. And so over the years, we have found that by just picking stuff up, clearing the trails, having people up there, it's a lot cleaner. And the other interesting part is there are a lot of retired people who just love going up there and pick up trash. They want to go out, but they appreciate the value of it. And what's happened, and I hope that can happen to our land, is there's developed this ethic of ownership, of at least keeping it clean and keeping it safe. So we've had a few homeless people there we've had to deal with, but other than that, in the last 15 years, it's been a very safe place, even though there are a lot of pine trees and it's pretty wild. But it's a result of keeping up with the maintenance. And anytime we have a no dogs policy there, and I think we want no dogs on our property. Mount Appetite allows dogs, but we just go up to the people very nicely and say we have a policy for no dogs here. We want to protect the wildlife, and people pretty much follow that. There was a lot of anger at the beginning, but people do respect landowners. And I hope, especially when the landowner talks to them and doesn't try to be confrontational. And I think that's the danger, is if people start, posting land is confrontational. It really is. And that gets people angry, but we're not going to do that. So
I know that one of the last podcasts we had, I had a subject, Doug Duran, who he runs a Sharing the Land campaign out of Wisconsin, and one of his models is that he owns a large farm out there and allows hunting and stuff. But what he asks is that people participate in activities on the farm to help him manage it, whether that's going out and cutting hay or anything like that. Mm-hmm. Have you thought about that in the past, where people that maybe use your property come out and help you out so that you can kind of continue to allow access that way?
Well, I think that before you picked up the shingles, I've gotten to know a couple hunters who contacted me about the shingles, and then they, the day before you showed up, they went up and down the road with bags picking up trash. I've had, we have it no longer looks like a gravel pit, but it's a retired gravel pit that used to be full of trash. A couple of hunters came by one day, this was 30 years ago, and said, do you mind if we pick up the trash? And so, they do things like this, the hunters do. Now, as far as the other people, I don't know. I mean, I haven't gotten much. I do have one fellow, and I'd like to catch him, who comes by sometime like about 5 in the morning and picks up all of the bottles. And one of my turkey hunters said, we caught him. He's not just picking up bottles, he's also picking up trash. And I got his name once, and I think he's got some kind of a criminal record. But that's his enjoyment, is to get up before anybody else is out there and pick up bottles and trash. And so
I know that you talked about it a little bit, and this is probably more for a true crime podcast, but like you were talking about some of the interesting stuff that you've had dumped out there. What are some of the things that you have had dumped out there?
Well, there was a body. I drove over a body in the culvert for all winter one year, a few years ago. The fellow had been murdered, and they stuffed him under there. But then there've been a lot of odd things. The one I couldn't figure out is at a high point in our property, up just not too far off the road, hanging on a tree was a 16 by 16 inch mirror.
That's
and
odd.
Nothing else. There was actually a piece of plastic PVC, I guess, off to the side, and there was sort of an old bench or something, but it's not there anymore.
Maybe it was the North Pond Hermit, and he decided to move on.
We've had a number of people move in there, and we've had to have Auburn police come and escort them out. For a while, we had a couple of deadheads who wanted to live on one of the landings, and I said, that'll be great. They had their own little trailer, and they were going to live there, and I said, my only request is that you monitor the pit and keep the trash from being dumped. And so they picked up trash, and it was an interesting, strange kind of couple who wanted to sit up there in the woods, and I was happy with them and liked them. He did a little work for me. But Auburn came along and said it was a zoning violation. So.
Is there anything else that you'd like to talk about your property, or anything that's kind of coming to mind that you want to add to this?
I don't think so. I'm very optimistic about the possibility of working with Auburn. Auburn has a conservation commission now, and Auburn is one of the biggest towns in the country, actually. It's got an awful lot of open area. Not as much is like ours, in that ours is very diverse with a lot of forest. Much of the forest is being cut down, and there's a lot of pressure for houses and stuff like that. But there also are potentials for Auburn and Minot. Now, you've got to realize our property is partly in Minot, and Minot Corner is a nice little community of people. And I see our property as possibly being an asset to Minot as well. Yeah, I think, in the long term, you got to think, what's going to be going on a century from now, and I hope it's still there, and it's got trees and deer and turkeys, not too many turkeys, but not too many deer. Our problem, of course, as I've told you, is with everybody, there's so many deer around, but and there have been problems. One of my neighbors is complaining about all the deer on his property, and we don't have too many. We have them here and there, but we have an electric fence. It does keep them under control. We've had no damage this year, and I don't know whether it's because we finally taught them to stay away from our garden, or whether they're just eating the neighbor's vegetables. But
With that being said, I mean, I know you talked about the hunters, the great interactions that you've had with hunters and them being respectful of your land. What is the final message that you'd like to say to all users of people's private property?
Pick up trash. There is one hunter I've had who's a loner, and he doesn't like to talk to people, and that's okay. But I think that the ultimate goal here, and I think you appreciate this, Kris, is the human interaction in the community and talking to people about stuff. I mean, I came upon a couple of my hunter neighbors at the top of our hill right after they had shot a deer, And I went up and talked to him, and it was really a lot of fun because he was all excited about it. And, and now we run into each other in town, and he remembers that. And it's just that communication and the community stuff that's so important. And that's what's happened, I think, at Mount Appetite and at Thorncrag as well. People get to know each other. And this is an opportunity to get to know each other, at least to get to know me and my wife.
And we always encourage that. We encourage any user or user group that, because one of the largest complaints we get from landowners is they just want to know who's on their property. Mm-hmm. They want to know who's out there. And I think you hit the nail on the head when you say that those interactions that you have, the positive interactions that you've had outweigh the negative ones that you've had. Mm-hmm. We always hear about the negative stuff, but those positive ones are the ones that resonate with you, that you always continue. And when you see those people, whether it's in the grocery store or the local store, it's always the things that you remember.
I can't really say much negative about, other than the road, about any negative consequences of people on our property, but there haven't been all that many. Here's a funny story. Alice and I were out there a couple of years ago during hunting season. We were walking along a trail, and I saw a fellow off in the woods, and he had blaze orange on, and we had blaze orange on. And I started walking toward him, and I said, "Oh, is that Tom?" And he kind of got up and he got embarrassed, and Alice said, "David, he was going to the bathroom." So anyway, that's the kind of stuff you get.
Well, if Tom's listening to the podcast, I'm sure he appreciates that today, for sure. But I definitely want to thank you, David. I mean, like I said earlier, we in the state of Maine very much appreciate the land that you own and the open access that you allow, and allowing people to enjoy that, whether that's hunters, hikers, bird watchers, or anything like that. And we really do appreciate it, and that's why I wanted to bring you in. You have a good story to tell, that you understand being a landowner, to allow access and to still have 7 tons of shingles dumped on your property, which that wasn't in the road, that was definitely on your property, and to still continue that tradition of open access in the state of Maine. And on behalf of our department and myself, I want to thank you, and all the sportsmen of the state of Maine want to thank you.
Well, thank you for all your work, and thanks to the legislature for funding you guys.
Thanks for listening. I hope this discussion has helped shape your perspective on the importance of supporting our private landowners in Maine. Join me again next week when I'll be chatting with Ben Bredigan, the wing shooting manager of onX Hunt. If you've ever been curious about how this GPS Maps hunting app got started, you won't want to miss this episode. In the meantime, do your part to help protect Maine's tradition of access to private land by being a responsible land user and showing your appreciation and support for Maine's private landowners. Visit mefishwildlife.com/outdoor partners to find out more about how you can get involved and become an outdoor partner.